Hey everyone, it's Nathan Freeber. Welcome back to the Leadership Vision podcast, our show helping you build positive team culture. Now, we're a consulting firm that spent 25 years investing in teams so that people are mentally engaged and emotionally healthy. Today in the show, we're talking about our manifesto. According to Wikipedia, a manifesto is a written statement declaring publicly the intentions, motives, or views of the issuer. And while that's part of what we're going to be sharing here today, we hope to inspire you to think more deeply about your work and why.
Sometimes when we get into those negative spots, we can start to name them toxic, start to name them problematic. I really think they're just kind of human, but we start to obsess with everything that is wrong and broken. And I think a manifesto, a value speech, a statement of stories that are true and expressions of who we are, when they're told into the universe, when they're written, when they're spoken, that's when we have this opportunity to say, yes. It kind of anchors us into where we're headed. It anchors us into where we want to go and who we want to bring along.
Now, before we unpack where our manifesto came from and how you can begin to craft your own, we're going to read ours dramatically to help you understand where we're coming from. Enjoy. Imagine a place
where people feel connected and a certainty of purpose emerges. A place accepting of all people, all ages and genders,
all beliefs and cultures, and all lived experiences are welcome. A place where people are free to be themselves and be empowered to live a life free of shame and guilt, stereotype or bias, limitations, or lack of opportunity.
In this place, people feel a sense of belonging, a knowing that their life matters and their contribution to humanity is nurtured and needed. And in this place, imagine being happy, experiencing joy with others, laughter, and peace.
Now, imagine your team, not afraid to be this place. In this type of place, we believe people are the single most important focus of attention and investment.
We understand the importance of keeping people mentally engaged and emotionally healthy. And we create places of connection where a sense of belonging is developed to foster an enthusiasm to align on purpose.
Our work empowers people to believe that we are greater together than we are apart.
This place is for you as an individual,
a team member, a leader,
an executive, or a business owner.
So we just read the statement, Brian and Linda. This is our manifesto, how we're leaning into 2023 and possibly beyond. Where is this manifesto coming from?
As I think back to the origin of the manifesto, I first have to say that just the word manifesto, it sounds so something. Because like the word itself is like, it's big, it's mysterious, it's whatever. And so to use the word manifesto, I think it's kind of strange for me. I once had a friend who did a manifesto like 7 years ago, and he had this compelling video where he's like walking in the dark. It's cold. You can see his breath, and he's just like, he's stating this manifesto, and it was chilling and emotional. I thought no one can do it that well. But this manifesto came, after this long process of the things we've talked about in the changes in the business. In the previous podcast, we talked about that. And I just felt that there was something that wasn't anchoring all this work that we were doing. And I felt that I needed like an intellectual, emotional anchor to all this work. Like, why is it that we're going through all these changes? Why is it that we're getting tremendously focused? And as much as I wanted to avoid writing a manifesto, I have to say that the inspiration came by just this original thought after I had a tremendously good breakfast. I was sitting at the kitchen table. Linda was in the other room. And all of a sudden I thought, this is it. And I opened up my iPad and I wrote the manifesto as it is right now in one sitting, just top to bottom, just wrote it. And I'm like, this is it. I walked in the other room and I said, Linda, I'm going to read you something I just wrote. No judgment, just give it a shot. What do you think? But I think this could be our manifesto.
I think you actually said, why don't you read this? I want to hear what it sounds like.
Oh, I did. Yeah. There's something that happens in me when I hear Linda's voice read what I've written. It sounds differently. And when she reads it for the first time, then I know if it's capturing this emotional nerve that I'm really looking for. So yeah, I did ask you to read it out loud.
Yes. And my first response was, this is it. This is a culmination of our values, our direction. When we say that we're excited and focused on positive team culture, well, what are the components? And that's not just, a team will be positive if you have the right people that are happy and smiley and whatever else. Instead, it's, what does it look like to bring your whole self, your best self, together in a place where you can thrive? And I think that was that's what that came across to me. And I think a good manifesto, a good anchoring statement or communication about who we are and how we're going to operate in the world was, I think it's this.
Because, just before I wrote this, I just had this tremendous conviction of, to answer this question, why does this matter? Like, why does our work matter? And does our work really capture who we really are? And so I didn't want to write like belief statements. I didn't want to write value statements. I thought a manifesto just needs to capture not just our purpose, but the meaning of our work, the intentionality of our work, how it is that we are seeking to engage people in a professional, emotional, and intellectual way. It has to capture that. And I also believe that if I could write something that truly allowed the listener and the reader to understand like how open our arms are to the people that we work with, I want to be able to communicate that as well, because part of what we want to do is we want to work with our clients in a place where people can come together and feel at ease and feel safety and feel a sense of openness and belonging. And this statement is something that says, we don't care where you come from. It doesn't really matter to us, like what you believe. We want us to all be connected and feel that sense of belonging. And this manifesto, in a way, demonstrates what it is that we are trying to practice when we are with our clients. And that's not it.
Okay. Oh, but wait, there's more.
Because Nathan, when you think about the three of us and who we are as people, as I wrote this, I felt, can each of us get behind each of these statements? Does each of these statements capture what we believe as people? Does each of these statements capture how we live our lives and the people that we connect with, the communities that we're involved in? It has to back up not just the business, but this manifesto has to back up really who we are too. And the only way that this manifesto works for Leadership Vision, if it captures the integrity of who we are as integrated people, not just integrated holistically, individually, but integrated as community members, as family members, as people who are investing in the lives of people in our neighborhoods, in our communities, in the places that we frequent. It needed to back that up too. Like, is this really who we are as people? Because if I could capture that, I knew that I had something that represented what we're trying to do as a business, because we are bringing our best selves to our work.
Well, and it's not just what we aspire to do, it's what we're actually doing. And so, Nathan, I see that you're working in the document and you're highlighting all the times that we say the word place.
Well, and that's going to be like that's going to be my next question for you guys, is the word place or places is mentioned 10 times in this short 2.5 paragraph manifesto. And so I'm curious, how are you using that term? Why is place so important? I think I know the answers to these questions, but for our listeners, and the reason I wanted to mention this is because everyone has a place or multiple places. Right. And so what was compelling and interesting and, dare I say, fun for me the first time I read this was thinking about what is my place, sometimes referred to as a role, in the creation of this. What is my place as in like the area where I can exert the most influence? And so I think, I don't want to say this is a charged term, but I'm wondering if you can talk about that for a little bit. This most frequent of used words here, place.
So let me
make sense?
Try to start. Yep.
Oh,
like, should I rephrase that, or is it?
No, because what
Okay.
you did was, you made yourself place, physical place, and it's a value. So
Nathan, that is a great series of questions, but also I think this will help move our conversation forward. And that is, when I think of place, I think of what I've learned from Brian Schubring. And when Brian goes to places, I mean, Nathan, like we have rocks and stones and
trinkets,
pieces of wood and things.
I found a seashell the other day in an old bag.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That he has given you, or we've given each other, as part of an expression of who we are at Leadership Vision, that we were somewhere together, or there was something that we learned in the different places in the world. And so when I think of place, I think of what I've learned from Brian and how to connect not just to people, but to place and encourage people to find their place. So that's one part of it. The other part of place for me goes to a conversation that was forged in the middle of COVID. And I think that when we're just online, and I thought, if this is my place, sitting at a desk, talking to a big monitor and a computer, what kind of place is this? And it dovetailed into our conversation, and we've talked about this in previous podcasts. So what is a team? A team is anyone a leader has invited to the table. Well, the table is a place, and the table during the pandemic was at this Zoom table, right? The Zoom room, whoever was invited to show up and be a part, taking up places and spaces together. And so a place is where we gathered. So we happened to gather on Zoom, or you're on Teams, on Google Meet, or whatever the platform it was. And I think it grounds us into the actual. So we do a lot of work at Leadership Vision trying to focus on the curation of the spaces, of the places, that we don't just show up and assume that the place is going to handle everything, but we take steps to prepare the places so that people can find their place.
That's really good.
What does that make you think, Nathan?
I think back to our values when we talked about,
I
don't remember, a couple of weeks ago in a podcast, we talked about those places and spaces. Like, that's a value for ours. I wonder, Brian, can you speak to that a little bit? Like, how intentional was it to include this many references to place in this as it relates to our values and what we're trying to do holistically, kind of like a bigger picture than specific client engagements?
Place was important for me to emphasize because I thought without the emphasis of place, the rest of our values don't happen. And we cannot be who we are without the sharing of place. And that place is so interactive. That place is so interdependent. Place is trusting one another to show up as you authentically are. And so for me, as Linda said, and Nathan, as you've experienced, place is of tremendous importance to who I am as an individual. And so for me, I thought, when people gather together, if I can capture someone's attention to recognize that when a place is established, something incredibly unique can happen there, it all of a sudden invites a sense of connection amongst people and anticipation almost of what could potentially happen in this place if we were aligned, if we were connected and interdependent with each other. And for place to work, there needs to also be a sense of freedom to express yourself in that place, to trust one another, to feel safe, and also to have expectations. That also happens when place is established. Place can be when you're all alone and you have that place in your home, the place where you work, that is just yours. And place is also meant to be shared. And I just really believe that from my experience, when people come together with an intentionality and a sense of purpose in place, the extraordinary can happen.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting about our work, as we've seen pre, post, and during the pandemic, if you want to break it up into that, is that there is this sense of helping people understand their inner motivation or understand why they're doing what they're doing, and maybe not necessarily to like, oh, you need to be on this line or this road in life to like achieve whatever, the one thing you're supposed to achieve in life or whatever. It's understanding that in the light of the different places you occupy, be that family, vocation, avocation, like all these different things. And so I think what our work does in a lot of ways is help people understand those purposes, and maybe even just tap into some of the things that they already know about themselves and just perhaps identify it in a different way.
I definitely agree, Nathan. And I think there are a lot of businesses that they do the hard work of naming the values. And then some of the body of work that I have read and encountered is that, do a value speech or invite people into the embodiment of your values. And I think when someone does that, it then gives you a little more handholds onto where you're headed, where you're going. And so how I saw this, and as I was reading it for the first time when Brian handed it over to me and said, read this, it felt like an embodiment of our values. It named the why. It got me excited. It got me motivated. Then it's like, I want to move to action. I move to action. So I wonder if part of us sharing our manifesto, if it's not just about like, hey, what we're about, because maybe you already sense that, but maybe it's how we can encourage you to find your manifesto, to find your value speech, to find a way that you can articulate what gets you out of bed, what motivates you, what inspires you to do the work that you feel called to do.
The manifesto also serves for us as almost an expectation of how we are to show up with people. So it's an expectation for ourselves. As we demonstrate and display this manifesto to the world, it's also what you can expect when you experience us. What it is that you should feel when you're engaged with us as we're serving you. And it also kind of sets a mark of what excellence looks like for us in our work. It embodies all of that.
Linda, I like what you said about, yes, that what we're sharing here is to tell you a little bit more about us as we've been doing some changes. But I think more than that, it's an invitation to challenge our listeners to think about, maybe their why or their purpose or, the places that they occupy and what is the reason for being there. Life goes by so quickly. We were talking about this Eagles concert that I went to recently, and the lead singer at one point, he's like, this is our 51st year touring, and it has gone by like that. And these guys are all in their 70s. And you think about how many of us are going through life without much of a purpose or without an understanding. I'm not saying the Eagles were, but without an understanding of like, where is their place? Where is their purpose most clearly defined? And we can maybe think, when I get to this next place or this next phase or whatever, then I'll figure it out. But my challenge, I think why we're sharing this is to encourage people to do that now, do that today. Think about what are some of the unique gifts that you offer to the world. Do you have, I don't know if we want to go here, but how does someone do that? Like I'm realizing as I'm saying this is a giant...
It's huge.
A giant task that, is not done easily. And I think sometimes when we, think of these big things, we're like, oh, that's just too much. It's like, oh, I want to run a marathon. Oh, that's too much work. So they don't do anything. Is there like a baby step? Like if you're like, this is really interesting and compelling and I want to begin to explore this, like what would be that first initial step?
Nathan, I'm not sure how you're going to edit this, but
maybe I won't.
When I was reading a book about the importance of writing a manifesto, this author, pages and pages and pages of the different manifestos that he had written, how they've changed over time. And then I was waiting for him to turn the corner and ask the reader to do it. And he did. And he had like a checklist of 20 different things that need to be covered in the manifesto, upon which I immediately was like, not doing that. Like that was like 19 steps too many. But the gravity of it, like I felt that. And the reality of what his list meant was this is going to be work. And so what I did was, obviously it captured my attention, but I set the task aside. And Nathan, I did not intend to write it at all because of how much work it seemed to be. However, that list of 20 things translated into two simple statements. Why does this work matter? And why does this work matter to me? And when I came to the point of writing, it was because I knew this is why this work matters to me. And that's where the manifesto came from, was my ability to just answer that question. Why does this work matter to me? And why is this work important right now? Once that came to light, it was easy to write.
I love that, because we can ask, maybe not answer, but we can ask ourselves that question in whatever place we find ourselves, whether that's volunteering at our kids' school, whether that's in a job that we're not sure if we want to be in, whether that's starting a business or in a family or other relationship. And that is one of the simplest yet most difficult questions I've heard in a while, and one that we probably all need to wrestle with.
So why does this work matter, and why does it matter to me? Obviously I'm experiencing, because I'm sitting right next to it, Brian's emotion as he's sharing this, but it's striking a chord with me. It's striking a chord with me. And what I would say is, what we've learned over the last couple of years is storytelling is a leadership skill. Being able to speak and articulate and describe the behaviors or the expressions of either values or sentiments or what you're about. It's not just finding pithy phrases to put in your LinkedIn profile. It's not just the hashtags. I think this is an opportunity to do some inner looking and wonder, how are you wired? What has brought you here? Where do you find the greatest joy? I think the unique gift that we've experienced at Leadership Vision is almost what feels like, it's not a restart, but it feels like a reboot. Nathan, when you tell us unplug your computer and then plug it back in and make sure it's updated with the latest software,
I do that a lot.
Give it a chance to restart again. I feel like we've rebooted and we've reminded ourselves what we're about, why we're here, where we're driving to, what we're inviting others to join us in. And it's so easy when you are in just a comfortable space to be like, yeah, and everyone feels this way and we're just clicking along, doing great. And then life happens and there's negative things. And that's just being human. Sometimes when we get into those negative spots, we can start to name them toxic, start to name them problematic. I really think they're just kind of human, but we start to obsess with everything that is wrong and broken. And I think a manifesto, a value speech, a statement of stories that are true and expressions of who we are, when they're told into the universe, when they're written, when they're spoken, that's when we have this opportunity to say, yes. It kind of anchors us into where we're headed. It anchors us into where we want to go and who we want to bring along. And so when you're thinking about the volunteer organization that you are a part of, why are you part of it? And why now? And why has it almost chosen you? What gives you the great life there? And I think if you start with just a small thing, that it might be easier. Like, why do you enjoy being a family member? And I could trail off into what it means to be a wife and a partner and a mother and a daughter and a daughter-in-law and an auntie and a sister. And so it's almost like pick one and then practice that story that's connected, that demonstrates to the world how it's made manifest, thus Manifesto.
Thank you for listening to the Leadership Vision podcast, sharing our expertise in the discovery, practice, and implementation of a strengths-based approach to people, teams, and culture. For more resources about developing your strengths of your team, or the strengths of your entire organization, click the link in the show notes or visit us on the web at leadershipvisionconsulting.com. And if you found value from this episode and are encouraged and motivated and excited to go create your own manifesto, we would love it if you would just shoot us an email. You can email me, Nathan, at leadershipvisionconsulting.com. Let us know how it went, how it's going, if you have questions, whatever it is. And also, we would love it if you would share this episode or any of our other resources with people that you think might benefit from not only understanding and knowing their purpose, but knowing how to implement that in their organization. I'm Nathan Freeberg.
I'm Linda Schubring.
I'm Brian Schubring.
And on behalf of our entire team, thanks for listening.
Why does this work matter and why does it matter to me? That's so good.